We're on.
We should be on it. We see
Yep.
ourselves
Hey.
on Shadow Hunters. Let me just double check. Hi guys, welcome to Scotty Talks About. What a wonderful evening this evening for us, and we're just like as always, we're checking to see if we are live, and we are live. So good. We're all
Yes,
set.
that's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
A beautiful day in our neighborhood.
It is. What a wonderful night. I am so excited to have this night here tonight. And I would like to thank David Newell for being on our show tonight. Um, and everybody knows you as Mr. McFeely, but I want everybody to know you as David Newell tonight.
Okay, good.
We're going to go back further in history than you even have talked about before. I've watched so many interviews about you. I think I know you already, but it's going to be fun to actually talk about each other.
Okay, I'm willing.
But we're going back to babyhood. Then my other guest tonight is a really good friend of mine too, Kristen Erickson. Kristen, welcome to the show too.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Kristen is the co-author of 143 Reasons Mr. Rogers Still Matters, and she's also working with David on his book. So we'll talk about that too as we move forward.
Very exciting.
Welcome everybody. Thanks for being on the show. So David, I want to start. I know what year you were born. I think you're 19 days older than my dad.
Okay.
So I'm just going to call you Dad from now on.
I'll call you son, right?
Okay. Yep. I think it'll be good. That'll be great. But I want to talk about your early age because even in all the interviews that I saw and I watched, I didn't see you talk about your parents or where you were born. I know you were born in Pittsburgh area, but
yeah.
Let's start back there. Let's start back at the beginning.
Well, let's see. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I lived there until I was out of high school.
Okay.
And then I worked in Pittsburgh for about a year at the National Cash Register Company. They were the before computers.
Right.
then I went to the Pittsburgh Playhouse. Now you know all this, I guess, right?
I do, but everybody's watching doesn't. So that's why I wanted to go through it. So we have enough time to talk about everything. We can go off on tangents. We can do whatever we want. We're here to learn about you.
Okay, well, the Pittsburgh Playhouse is still in existence. It's a theater in Pittsburgh. It had a school, still does, but it's now affiliated with Point Park College in Pittsburgh. But then it was an independent school, and they had 3 theaters. And it was semi-professional, and professionals would work there, but they had a school. So I went there for 2 years and went through all of the theater courses. It was like going through college, okay, except you didn't have to take the academics. You just took everything related to theater. You didn't have to take English or history of the world and so forth. That was such a thorough education because you could work in the evenings on the productions. You were assigned to work on a professional production and you learn your craft. Right. Acting, performing, directing, everything. I loved it. And I went to summer stock in the summer and worked there. But my job that I think indirectly got me to Mr. Rogers started at the Playhouse. They had on the weekends children's shows. And these weren't just skits. These were fully produced children's shows with professional actors and supplemented by some of the students.
Oh, cool.
And it was in a theater that sat 600 people, packed every weekend. And I was the host of the children's theater. Oh, wow. And I was a clown. And I would welcome the children and get them settled down because getting 600 kids into an auditorium, you can imagine. These were intermediate, not preschoolers. These were sort of 8 to 10-year-olds. And my name was, of all things, Bimbo the Clown. And you can't do that now, but then Bimbo was just another funny clown's name. And that's who I was. And I did that for about 10 years, along with working behind stage and everything with other productions. But before that, I was in elementary school in Pittsburgh, and I remember being in the class plays, the 4th grade play, the 5th grade play, and I loved both helping behind the scenes and being in the show itself. It was wonderful. And my father and mother were both from the Pittsburgh area. My father you know, I'll d-
Let's go.
take a right turn a minute.
Perfect. Perfect. I like those.
My father loved sports. His college degree though was philosophy, but he played every sport imaginable. Baseball, football, he refereed, he did everything. He got a football scholarship to college. He loved it. But when he got out, he got married and I was bored and he got a job. And then the war came about. And he ended up working as an insurance salesman. You know, he did fine, but that's not the career he wanted.
Okay.
And on the side, he would have a little league team. He would have a referee basketball. I don't think he even got paid for it. He just loved it.
Okay.
And I think I saw all of that, knowing that he would have loved to have done that every day and not go into an insurance office. And I think that's what I found
Right.
working with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I love what I was doing.
Right.
And,
So
and
what did your dad say? What did your dad say about you wanting to go into theater?
he had passed away by that point. He died when I was about 15 years old, so he never knew of any of that, except he did come to see a few of the neighborhood plays we did. We did plays in each other's garages in the summer.
The Little
And we would-
Rascals.
in a
Charged
way, it
admission.
was.
Yeah.
In a way, it was. We would do. There was the popular records of the days, and they were on 78s. We would pantomime to the records, you know.
Oh, cool.
And I can't remember all the songs, but a Bing Crosby song, and we would sing and act it out, almost like the hit parade. You know,
Right.
people don't know what the hit parade is either. You don't either, do you?
I do know.
I do.
Oh,
Sorry.
you do.
Name that tune.
But
That was way
it is like Name a Tune, except the hit parade. The irony to all that is it was NBC show. It came on in the mid 50s, and they go through the top 10 songs of the week, and it'd stop from 10 and end up at number 1 song of the week is Shrimp Boats Is a Coming or something. And that's what it was. And Fred worked on it. He was he was the floor manager for those shows
for your hit parade.
at
That's
NBC.
right.
And this is before he got into children's television.
Right.
And he said it's funny because Shrimp Boats Is a Coming was a very big song in the 50s. And it stayed on the top 10 or the top 5 for weeks. And and they would do a scene around the theme of the song.
Right.
And after you do a scene with Shrimp Boats, what do you do the next week? And the next week? And then they have to think
Hard to follow a
concept. So at any rate, Fred worked on it. He worked on the Kate Smith Hour. And all this time, while Fred was doing that, I was in Pittsburgh in school watching those programs. You know, the
Oh my
Kate
gosh,
Smith
so
show.
cool.
Kate Smith was a famous singer.
Yes, I
And
know
she
that.
had a show in the afternoon similar to what Rosie O'Donnell had, that type
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
And
Fabulous guess.
yes. And so I was watching all this, had no earthly idea that, or knew who Fred was at all. I didn't meet Fred until 1967.
Oh, wow.
But I knew who he was when he came back to Pittsburgh because he started the Children's Corner,
Okay.
which started in '54. So I knew who he was. He was quite well known in Pittsburgh, but not to the rest of the country, just Pittsburgh. So that's a little bit. Oh, my mother was for years and years and years stayed home, but then after my father passed away, she got a job at Mellon Bank, which is a big bank in Pittsburgh, and worked in the library, which she loved. I think it was a distraction for her too.
Okay.
But my father died when I was a junior in high school, and so he never knew. But my mother knew, and she in fact, Fred would send her a birthday card all the time. So he knew my mother, but not my father. And I don't think my father died in '54, and that is ironically the year that the
Children's Corner.
Children's Corner came on. Yes.
Didn't your
Thank you.
grandfather foster your love of the theater, though?
Yes, you're right. That was the other thing. My father's father and grandmother and mother. The first play I'd ever seen, it was a professional production of Harvey, which was a a classic comedy about a man who thinks he sees a 6-foot rabbit and no one else can see it but
I
him.
love that show.
Oh, I do too. And it
Kind
starred,
of like my life now, because I see things that people don't think I see. So I understand how.
Right, exactly. There's a rabbit next to you now, Scotty.
but that makes you happy too, seeing that 6-foot rabbit. I think he was so happy.
Me too.
At any rate, it was a Saturday matinee. My grandfather knew this would be a play. It was very whimsical. It was an adult play, but it wasn't adult material. It was
Right.
comedy. Not too many kids were there though. And it was this grand old theater in Pittsburgh called the Nixon Theater. And I took a bus downtown and met him, and he took me to the theater. And it was a grand old 1890 theater that just a beautiful building. Sadly, they tore it down and built the Alcoa building in its place. But it went down in 1949. At any rate, I was enchanted with this. It was a Saturday matinee, never forget it. I can see where I was sitting. I can see the ambience of the theater, the red velvet, the curtain, the lights, etc. And afterwards, Joey Brown, who starred in it, a very famous comedian at the time, made a curtain speech. They took a bow, and then the other cast members went off. He pulled a chair around from the set, sat down in it, and proceeded to do some magic tricks, just chatting with the audience. And I found that just incredible, talking because he was a funny man. So and I'm sure this was his vaudeville act at one point too. But and I went home that night, and I remember in the basement creating a stage and putting curtains up, not window curtains, but a sort of a blanket, and made an act curtain, set the stage up in a orange crates for a table, things like that, and did Harvey myself. I played all the parts, including the White Rabbit. but it was that's right. Kristen reminded, that was my first theater experience. But the funny part about it, so it got me interested in theater. So the next week, or maybe a year later, the bad news came that they're going to tear the theater down. And the last person who was appearing at the theater before they tore it down was, of all people, Mae West.
Oh my gosh.
Nice.
Mae West in Diamond Lil. And I didn't know her. Now she smiled. Now she's like Mary Poppins. But then
Right.
she had quite a reputation. But if you go back and see some of her older films, she was quite racy.
Yes.
But a true artist. She was a very funny woman. But so I kept asking why can't we go to see Diamond Lil? Well, that should be funny too. And I couldn't get a straight answer. He never took me to see Diamond Lil.
Grandpa was busy, huh?
Yeah, but I think Grandpa would have liked to have seen Diamond Lil, but he didn't want to.
Yeah. But Grandma would have hit him up. So
Yeah. At any rate, that they tore the theater down, and she was the last performer. Then they built another theater to replace it, and he continued to take me to see plays. Another Joey Brown, about 3 years later, he came in a musical, and we went to see him again. So it was quite I had quite a experience going to these are professional. These weren't high school plays.
No, these are touring shows. Yeah.
Touring shows.
Yeah.
And at that time, Pittsburgh got all the big shows out of New York and grand old theaters. And Pittsburgh still has some grand old theaters, but not like they did Milwaukee, thinking of close by to you, had these grand old theaters. Some are still there.
The Pabst Theater is still there. The Riverside. Yeah. Hang on, I know we're freezing a little bit.
But at any rate,
yeah, the Pabst
you hear me?
Theater,
Yeah.
that's still there.
And Milwaukee or Madison has a brand new theater, don't they? As part of the school.
The Overture Center for the
Overture
Arts.
Center, yeah.
Yes.
You remember appearing there a couple of times.
Yeah, I was there twice with the Youth Symphony of Wisconsin, I guess, and they all had concerts in a couple concerts a year, and I remember being there twice. And it was part of the WHA, is that's
Yeah.
the,
That's the
Yeah,
station. Yep.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
that's Channel 21.
and they were involved in it, and they brought me, and I read Peter and the Wolf one time, and I just think that we did a concert the next time with Mr. Rogers' music and, the Lone Ranger theme, and they were about 45, 50 minutes long, short for young children. At
And then
any
what
rate,
did you do? You just read the parts? You came out and read the part of Peter the Wolf, but with the
yes,
Mr.
but I'd have to take cue from the conductor, because I can't read music, and
Right.
you have to get the words in time with the music. So he would sort of nod to me, and I
I'm
would,
not again.
yeah. So I really had to look out of one eye to him and one on the page, because I can't read music at all. Then
Right.
after a while, you sort of get used to it, but you don't the first couple times. If you don't know music, now it gave me a very interesting perspective, because when you talk about children learning to read and illiteracy, it must be that way if you can't read. How I felt looking at all of these notes and everybody else in the orchestra and the conductor knowing what they were playing, and I'm sitting there not knowing a thing and
Right.
wishing that I could know what that was. And that must be what not being able to read feels like,
Yeah.
in a way.
I would agree. I mean, I think, my son who has autism, it took him a long time to learn how to read, my youngest one. But now he does really good. If not, he looks at some of the letters and he makes up a word. And that's always good too.
but he learned how to read.
Yes.
And I loved to read. I don't have enough time, but I like to read too. In fact, I was talking to another interviewer a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know if you both know the book called the books, or the series called Uncle Wiggily. Does that ring a bell?
Yep.
Very
You
much.
know.
And I used to play the game all the time.
Oh, yes.
Wiggily was a great game. Oh my God.
But a lot of people don't know Uncle Wiggily. And I loved them as a kid. And my mother would, before I could read, started to read them to me.
Right.
And then when I could start reading, I have the series of them. To make a long story short, we went to New York City when my aunt lived in New York City, my mother's sister. We went to visit her. And on the way, or while we were there, she said, "Oh, we're going to go to New Jersey and visit someone." So we did, and it was the author of Uncle Wiggily. She had set up this appointment for me to meet Howard R. Garris, was his name.
Wow.
And I remember we went to this East Orange, New Jersey house, a lovely neighborhood, big old Victorian house that he lived in, and sat in his living room for about an hour. And I don't think I appreciated this. It'd be like meeting Dr. Seuss, or something like that. At the time, it was that big. At any rate, I remember very well. But I was,
How old were you? Sorry, David, at that time.
pardon me?
How old were you when she
Oh
did it for
boy.
you?
Probably 8, 9, 10, somewhere along there.
What a
So-
lovely mother to set something like that up.
Yeah. And yes, she did. I don't know how she did it. She found out where he lived. I think he also, under another name, wrote the Bobbsey Twins. Remember the Bobbsey Twins?
Oh
Do you remember
yeah,
that?
I love those books.
Yep.
But his name is Howard R. Garris, Garis. And no, he's since long ago has passed away. But he signed one of the books for me, so I have that too.
That's
At any rate, that's a little overview of my parents. They were very much interested in me. My father wished I could do sports more than I was able to. He could do anything.
Right.
I swim was fine. Football was not my sport. Baseball was fine, but I was not good at football. That was not my sport. But he was. He was. But again, this takes me all the way back, after I've just told you about my parents, to a phrase that you've heard before. When you're choosing your career or your life's work, choose something that you love, because you'll never work a day in your life. And that's why I feel working. I think I've told Kristen this before. I think I haven't worked a day in my life. I've loved the whole experience of working in the Mr. Rogers neighborhood. It's been quite something. And I think my father was not the same. I think he would have felt he was working. When he wasn't working is when he was with his baseball teams, and he was in his glory. He loved it, loved it. And just did my grandfather,
Right.
who took me to the theater. But my grandfather was more interested in theater than my father. As a matter of fact, I just sitting right in front of me is that's my
Oh my
grand
goodness.
Oh,
What a handsome man.
that's my grandfather, David Taylor Newell is his name.
oh my goodness.
And I don't
Recognize
have my
that?
father's picture handy, but that is
Oh, so that's so
and
exciting.
he is a little McFeely like in a way.
He is
The
the mustache.
Yeah, and that must have been taken. And he was a young man. He must have been his early 20s at that point.
My
But I
goodness.
just found that as I was going through photos. We're trying to, the photos you never file until you're forced to file them, and you did. Then well, who's this? Who's that?
Right.
I should write on the back of this. We're writing who
Oh,
they
that's
are.
great. That's so great. I still
But
have a nun. I have no idea why I have a picture of a nun. And in
yeah,
my family archives, well, I don't know who she is.
and then you get to the point where no one is around anymore to ask.
Right.
But at any rate, we named our one son, Taylor, after my grandfather, and Alexander, David Taylor Alexander Newell. And now he's got a son who's just born about a month ago, whose name is David Henry, I believe, Wheeler Newell.
I love that name.
So
Henry's my middle name, so that's why.
Is it really?
Yes.
Oh.
I'm Scott Henry. So.
Oh, that word. It sounds like something out of Hamilton, Scott Henry.
and what's kind of funny, my oldest son is Alexander Frederick, and my youngest is Christian Picard. I named him after Star Trek.
Oh, that's perfect. I knew it was familiar, but I wasn't sure.
Isn't your daughter the oldest?
Yes, we have Catherine Craig, and that's my wife's side of the family, Craig Newell, and she's married, has 3 children. And then we have Taylor, who has 2 children, and Alexander, who has 2, and he lives in Pittsburgh.
I wasn't sure if you had 6 or 7 grandchildren, and now I know 7.
Yes. Yeah, well, one's a step grandson and 6 grandchildren and a step grandson, so it's 7.
Total.
How is do you call his Davy, the newest David Newell? Is that,
I don't know what, I think they're calling him David. We just had a picture. I wish I could, I'm afraid to touch any control here, though I'll lose you all. But
you were Davy, were you not, when you were little?
Pardon me?
Weren't you Davy?
Yes, yeah. I got Davy all the time. Davey, I got.
Okay.
And I got Noodle, Noodle and things like that. You
have names from Noodle to Bimbo to
yeah, to McFeely, and I always called Mac, the crew on the floor of they called me Mac. And that, by the way, in case our viewers don't know, McFeely is Fred Rogers' middle name, Fred McFeely Rogers, and it was his mother's maiden name. So
that's a cool story I want to talk about in a couple seconds when we get there. We haven't even gotten there yet. Well, I want to talk about why did you move to California? Because didn't you move to California before you got the job with Fred?
Yes, I did. Let's see, what did I do? Oh, the order is I graduated. My father died, was junior, and then I, of course, finished high school. Then I didn't know what to do at that point. My mother was alone. I was the only child. And so I decided to get a job at National Cash Register. And that was going nowhere, really. And I was just doing office boy work. And I saw this ad in the paper. It said the Pittsburgh Playhouse School of the Theater. And my mother had some savings for me to go to college. And I said, do you think that we could use some of that and it's a 2-year course. If I don't like it, but I loved it. And that's how I started into theater, children's theater, et cetera, et cetera. So after that, what did I do after that? Then in summer stock, I met some friends, about 4 of us, and we decided, okay, let's try our luck in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And we drove cross country, Route 66, and I spent a year there. Of course, it was all, it was no luck, although I did some weekend theater and classes, but I worked at the May Company, downtown Los Angeles. You know,
Oh,
the May
wow.
Company, the
Yes.
famous, no, your viewers aren't going to remember the program, but Jack Benny, his wife worked at the May Company on
May Company.
recording.
Yes. Oh, wow.
And it was this May Company downtown Los Angeles, and it was working in the billing department where I'd be the person who ran the machine. I've not told this, and it sent out everybody's invoices. If you bought a chair and underwear and a dress, you'd get billed for it. And I'm the
Right.
one who put all the flyers in. It was automatic, but it was like, you ever see that Jackie Gleason routine where he's in the bakery and he's trying to, put icing on the cake, put a sherry, put it in the box, climb up the stairs and all over. That's what I felt like all day long. And I took the mail down to the loading dock. Oh, and it was getting to me. So then I decided, Hawaii just became a state. And one friend, we went to Hawaii and we got there. It'd been a state maybe just 6 months, maybe. But we got there at this Quonset Hut was the airport. That's what I remember. And they were filming location shots for Blue Hawaii with Elvis Presley. They were filming.
Oh, wow.
And I worked at the Bishop Insurance Company in Honolulu for a while. Then I decided, okay, we're coming back to Pittsburgh. I did summer stock. I worked for a while. I went back to the Playhouse. I also went concurrently to the University of Pittsburgh. Well, that led to working at the station, WQED, trying to get some experience in television. And that's where it all began
Right.
for me.
I like that. That was a fun excursion, which most people don't know.
No,
Yeah.
yes, but it's like paying dues,
Right, exactly.
And when you're in television, showbiz, any job really, you're always paying your dues. You're always learning,
Right.
especially with changing times. And it's so important, I think, for anybody in studying a craft to keep up with the craft too. You learn as you go. Anyhow, if I'm just rattling on, stop me and ask the last question.
I'm happy you rattled because this show is about rattling. This show ain't
Oh.
about anything solid. Me asking tons of questions. It's just us talking together. That's all I want to do. The more fun we can have, the more people can understand really who you are, and what makes you is the best thing for me. And that's what I wanted to show tonight.
Okay.
What brought you to WQED, David?
Pardon me?
What brought you to WQED?
Well, it's concurrent with going to school and college. WQED, the building at the time, was catty corner from the University of Pittsburgh, right across the street. They've since moved 3 blocks down, but then it was right across. And not
You froze for a second.
Playhouse, where I was also working. I was working at the Pittsburgh Playhouse.
Right.
And the man who did lighting for QED was also a graduate of the Playhouse. And he said, you should come up and just volunteer on the intern crew, and you'll learn about television. It's the coming thing. Now, this was the early 60s, early to mid 60s, and television had been sophisticated for about 10 years, but it really wasn't where it is now.
Right.
And I learned a lot just working on the floor crew, watching. And that's where I fleetingly met Fred. He was doing some wraparounds to a program he made in Canada. That's where Mr. Rogers began, in Canada.
Right.
And he was wrapping around some programs that were going to be distributed on the National Educational Network just on the East Coast, concurrently with me working there, volunteering. And I'd go back to the Playhouse, and I'd go to a class, I'd go to work at the Playhouse, I'd volunteer at QED. That's what got me to QED. But the summer of 1967, I visited my cousin in London. He was in the Navy, and he had been married, and he was out of the Navy, but working for the Navy as a civilian. So I went to visit him. And concurrent with that, a friend of mine was just finishing up his study year abroad, and and I met him after visiting my cousin, and we toured on $5 a day around Europe, and we use London as our base and American Express as our base. That's how we get our messages. No cell phones, no computers.
Right.
And I went into American Express one day, and there was a telegram waiting for me. We had come back from somewhere, Ireland maybe, and there was a telegram saying, this is from a mutual friend of Fred Rogers and mine. I didn't know Fred, but I knew we had a mutual friend. It said that Fred Rogers is taking the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood Program nationally, and I, my friend in the telegram said, have made an appointment for you when you get back.
Wow.
Try to get back by the 1st of September after Labor Day, and that's when your appointment is. And he made that. It was, again, that old adage, it's sometimes who you know. It's not,
Yeah.
it was who you know, but it wasn't one of those things that you're going to get a chance and nobody else will. It's just that my friend thought of me and told Fred, you should interview him too. There were other people being interviewed. It wasn't just me. So I did. I came back, met Fred, and we talked for an hour and told him all about my travels. He didn't tell me a thing about the job. He just said, "Oh, my favorite trip was to the Middle East." He spent time with when he was studying theology. He went to Middle East and spent a month studying, and told me all about that. And then, about the end of an hour, I knew a little bit about the job. We talked a little bit about it, but not in depth. And he said, after about an hour's up, he said, "When can you start?" That was my interview.
You start what?
And then he explained the job. He said, "Well, here's what I want. Someone to look after props and costumes and coordinate, help me behind the scenes, help me get ready, be my assistant." It was really a full-time job, just that. And then just before I was ready to leave, he said, "Oh, yes. I've written another part into the program of a delivery man, and I'd like you to play that part too." And I said, "Oh, I'd love to do that." He said, "Well, here's the first week of scripts. Come back in about a week. You'll start in about a week. In the meantime, just read through them and see about the private. Any questions, call me. I'll be out of town for a week, and I'll be back." And here I am. So
Yeah,
it
did he make it
was,
seem like, well, it was a little tiny thing? Well, you just play the delivery person. Okay, no problem.
Yeah. and I, it, he didn't elaborate, and it was at first, it was sort of just a walk on at first, but McFeely became a central character after a while. The first couple of seasons, I was very hyper. I said, "Just speed delivery," and I would be in and out. And then we had meetings, and we would talk about the program. Fred would say, "I think that we should give McFeely a little more, and we'll slow him down, and et cetera, et cetera." And he rounded the character out after a while. But the first year, I was frantic. And it was more comical and two-dimensional than it was. Fred wanted to round it out and give McFeely grandkids and give him a life,
Right.
Uh,
Your name wasn't McFeely. Well, the name in the
No.
first show was McFeely, but right before the show, it wasn't.
Well, in the script, the name of the delivery man, you know how they do scripts and they put colons, and
Yep.
the name was Mr. McCurdy, because Mr. McCurdy was the head of the Sears Roebuck Foundation, and he gave our company, or the foundation did, our company money to produce the program. In part, not all of it. Some of it was through National Educational Television and other donors, but basically Sears was the one place that really that's how we took off with their support.
Right.
So The day that we started taping, the very first, I had all my props in place and everything. And I was in the first, it was really a busy day for me because I had to get everything ready. Then I had to get to my McFeely costume. I did all that. I was waiting in the wings, and the phone rang. And Fred, it was for Fred. He went into the control room, and it was Mr. McCurdy calling to wish us well, to saying, good luck. We love your concept. It's this, he was telling Fred all of this. Fred repeated it, but that's what he was saying. But he said, one thing, please don't call the delivery man Mr. McCurdy. Maybe you could find another name, because his name is McCurdy. I think they thought it might be too self-serving. I don't know.
Right.
So at any rate, Fred came into the studio, and I could tell he was thinking about something. He was concerned. He said, we have to change your name. And I think, and before he finished that sentence, he said, McFeely. That's your name, McFeely. I guess McCurdy, McFeely, maybe that triggered something. I don't know.
Sounded the same.
He said, but that's who you are. And I think I've told Kristen this story that I was, we're ready to tape, the director said, and we did the first scene, and I was delivering a armadillo.
Armadillo.
Yeah.
A
And
live armadillo, correct?
pardon me?
A live armadillo. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Supposedly it was from the zoo. Yes. They're the zoo, one of the zookeepers, it was there. No animals were harmed on the set, but they brought it down and we showed the children. The reason he wanted to use an armadillo was there was a theme about armor protection in that week of programs. So the armadillo symbolically represented the theme. So we looked at its close-ups, et cetera, and said, well, I have to get it back to the zoo, Mr. Speed. And as I left, I said, get it back to the zoo. And as I was going out the door to fill in that little gap of opening the door and leaving, I said, well, speedy delivery. And he said, speedy delivery, Mr. McFeely. And here I am.
There you are.
This became a catchphrase in a way. So, and then he wrote a couple songs. There's a speedy delivery song.
I know, that was my favorite as a kid. Oh my God. You were always my favorite because you always brought in the cool things, when you used to go to the films, that was like that, you guys, and then the time when you and Fred sang the speedy delivery song as fast as you could.
Good. Yes. Oh, I remember that. But the speedy delivery song, sometimes he'd spring it on me. It wouldn't be in the script that day. And the way it was shot, Fred was always able to see not the cue cards, the time cards, the time.
Yeah.
I sometimes could see it, and I sometimes couldn't see it. So I have to go by what Fred was doing. And he said, oh, Mr. McFeely, before you go, do you think you could sing that speedy delivery song? So I knew we had a minute over, or under.
Yeah.
And so I would go speedy, I'd do the song.
And is it true?
Pardon me?
I wonder if it's true that rumor has it you didn't exactly love singing the delivery song, and Fred that was his way of joking with you sometimes. In a way,
Fred he knew that I'm not really a singer, and the pianist Johnny Costa would give me one note. He'd give me a start note because I just couldn't. I'd be off key if I didn't
start somewhere.
You could hear okay, and I'd take a pause. Johnny Costa would give me whatever the note that is.
Yeah.
Then I'd start. If there's anything you want, if there's anything you need, Speedy Delivery brings it to you. Here with Speed. That's the song. And I would sing
Keep
it.
going. I want to hear it all. I love it.
Well, it goes very simple. If there's anything, if there's anything you want, if there's anything you need, McFeely's Delivery brings it to you here with Speed. Yes, our speedy delivery is a speedy delivery. Speedy delivery to you. Speedy delivery, Mr. Rogers. Well, thank you, Mr. McFeely, and out the door I'd go. So, but then we would catch up on time. Then I'd be ready to close the show. Fred would start taking his sneakers, changing back into a suit coat, and out the door he'd go. Right. He had such a good timing. He could get out that door on the second. He just knew. Because being a musician, you've got to have timing. He knew. Right. He just knew how to, great timing. And the one other thing about Fred that maybe your viewers, listeners don't realize, and a lot of people don't, is what a sense of humor he had. He was a very funny man, great wit, very dry wit, but a great wit, and loved to laugh. He and his wife, Joanne, who recently passed away, were wonderful to have in an audience if you were performing, because they were such good appreciators.
Oh,
You know, they would sit there and just not look at it critically, just appreciate what their friends were doing on stage. You know, Don Brockett, who played Chef Brockett, was a performer who had a lot of reviews. He wrote a lot of material and performed regional humor in cabarets around Pittsburgh. And Fred would go and be a wonderful, wonderful audience member. And Fred had a great sense of humor. And, you know, a lot of that came from winging it in live television, you know, doing
improv.
doing King Friday with not a script, but just an idea. And that ad lib a lot of that. And that's where it came from. But he was also a very quick-witted man, very smart man. He spoke French, he spoke Hebrew, he knew Greek and love languages. He, of course, spoke English very well, and another Middle Eastern language I can't remember, but and probably theology, whatever he learned in Old Greek or whatever they call it.
Latin.
Pardon me.
Latin.
That's it. He studied Latin, which was a great basis for French for him. He spoke French fluently.
Right.
And he used that a lot in the early days, more so in the children's corner, but he used it in the neighborhood too. French. Yeah, Grandpere, and Colette was his niece, and that was way of introducing languages too.
Right.
And but he loved other languages, especially French, because, you know, when you think of it, the most musical language, I think, is French. You know, it has a lilt to it. I don't know if you know what I mean, but
definitely not like German.
No, it's not. Or it's not
very hard and staccato. You know, it's very poignant language. I know what you mean. It's because I'm a musician myself, so I understood, you know, the flowing of French, you know, and that was great.
Love letters delivered in German don't quite.
Yeah, don't work real good.
But even Italian and Spanish don't have the flow that the French does. It has some, but they're all lovely languages. It's just that I think he loved the musicality of French, I think.
Yep.
Anyhow, so what do you play? What instrument do you play?
I played everything from trumpet to tuba, and I also did string bass. I used to be in a jazz group.
Boy.
Yeah, so I love music.
To xylophone.
No, I didn't play the xylophone. Terry's mom does that. But
do you play piano too?
I don't. Terry's mom and dad did, and my son knows how. He plays guitar, so I mean we have it in the family, but it's not as strong anymore. And I do my other stuff now more. But what's so great about it is, what's great about it, David, is the fact that everything that you kind of done, I've done so far too, except for being Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. So anybody casting, let me know, because I have a degree in theater from the University of Wisconsin at Oshkosh. I have a degree in theater and speech and television.
Do you?
Yes, I do.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep. So I was in theater. I used to tour with shows. I did community theater. I toured. I did, you know, all type of stuff with theater too. And then I worked for CBS out of New York, but I worked for the station in Green Bay. So
what did you do there?
I was production supervisor. I ran all the crews for the news. I ran all the parades, all the special events. So very similar to you too. And as a prop master, I love you because that's what I did too. I did a lot of props and a lot of stuff. So when you said you were really hired to do props and stuff for Mr. Rogers, I was like, oh, that's amazing. We're so connected. It's kind of cool.
And I have a good friend who's from Green Bay. We went to the Pittsburgh Playhouse together, and you'll probably know the family name. Her name is Susan Shalhoub, and that's Tony Shalhoub's sister. And
Oh,
they grew up in in Green Bay, and Susan now lives in Atlanta, and she's an actress there.
Right.
But I met her at the Pittsburgh Playhouse, and
Oh,
we
my
are still in touch.
Oh,
And
that's
her
so
brother
cool.
and her brother is a wonderful actor.
Oh my
Just
God, he's great.
he can do anything. Tony Shalhoub can do anything. And Susan is a character actress too, and she can do it. She's very versatile. But I've been to Green Bay only once for an event, but I've been in parades too, and I know how hard parades are to run, especially.
I'm going to go off the track and give you a real quick story about me in a parade. So I was always, I would set up the parade, I would lead the parade, and then our directors would come in to, do the parade, and then the talent would come in. So I always then picked up a camera and I went down on the street to be one of the cameramen, and I roamed a lot, but I would get what?
Cut-ins.
Yeah, that was me. Yep. So I would jump on a float. Like one had a hot tub in it with the girls in it. I'm up on the hot tub with the girls, and everybody at home's laughing. But you would see me more in the shots because I was running around trying to get all the close-ups. Well, one day they had these close-ups of, they had this float that had all these little things that you put above your fireplace, although at Christmas time, like all those.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So they had a float of that and nobody could see it at home. So they go, get a close-up, get a close-up. So I'm right there getting a close-up. And all of a sudden my camera's like this. Next thing you know, my camera's like this. And what happened was I didn't see that this float had the tires past the base of the float. And so my foot was under the float. And I was caught. And then I yell, of course, stop. And of course they stopped on top of my foot. Did you? I would just let it roll over. It would have been better. But I yelled,
did you break your foot? Did it break your foot?
I had a lot of problems. Yes. And so the
live television
anchors were making fun of me because they saw, there's our cameraman Scotty being funny again.
Not so much.
They said it live on the air, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, the other camera sees these ambulances coming in to pull me off the street. Then the radio station gave me Weenie of the Week because I was the only person on TV that should know that floats don't float.
They run over your feet if you don't get out of the way. That's what I was always afraid about too, because in these parades, you're in a car or you're in a Jeep or something,
right?
And some kind of kids and people come out to shake your hand, and I always would worry that the, children, they're not watching.
Right.
That's what, and so far, I was in the parade in Milwaukee. They have a name for it.
Circus parade?
Not the circus, the other one, the beginning of the season. Oh boy, it was in the spring, I think.
Okay.
It was a huge parade. They had a trolley that I was riding on.
Okay.
But I was the grand marshal along with Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon. We were the three grand marshals. They had us spread out through the parade.
How did you get to that parade again?
You remember the story?
Yes, I do.
They picked us up at the hotel, and we had to be down front, the three of us, and a big white stretch limo pulls up, and Annette gets in, and a black stretch limo pulls up, and Frankie gets in, and then a Plymouth Voyager pulls up, and I get in. So it was mine wasn't quite as glamorous, but I think they probably had their own PR person arrange all that. I was my own PR
bike over yourself, right?
I was yeah.
Right.
Anyway, I got to the parade, and that's all that mattered. So, but I always liked parades. I got the biggest kick out of parades because you really see reactions from people, and
yes.
You know that somebody's watching. When you're in a studio, mm-hmm. You're seeing the four walls. You think you're doing the program for four walls until you get out there, and television is remarkable how it's everywhere, at least in the United States. At any rate,
I'm gonna jump in on this one because we're talking about parades and events you go to. Can we talk about the Purple Panda?
Can we? Did you say?
Yes. Can we talk about the Purple Panda?
Yes. Why, have you met the panda?
No, because I haven't seen your wife yet.
Oh, yes, my wife would, that's how we first met. I'm moving the chair and if I'm,
It's okay, go ahead.
um,
But I thought this was
yes,
a great story. I love this.
which story is that about?
All of it. I mean, even your son just not too long ago was in a parade as the Purple Panda.
Yes, well, my wife was in, uh, let's see, she did it for a long time and she even did it when she was pregnant with our daughter for a while.
Wow.
And then she decided, because somebody came up and say, let's see what's in there. And and she didn't want to take any more chances. You know, is that real padding, Panda? And so she begged off and she's not done it since. And
Oh, wow.
our daughter is I guess she's 38 now, so it's been 37 years.
Yeah.
But then I recruited then our daughter, when she was 18, I recruited her, I've recruited our son, everybody. And what I should have done over the years, I would take the costume with me, and then the local station or the local parade could hire an actor to wear it,
Right.
thus saving the station airfare for another person to come along. So that's what I did mainly. But I should have kept a diary in the Panda costume box and have each person sign it, because thousands have worn that costume or variations on a costume. But one time in South Carolina, I believe, it was very hot. And they did the parade early in the morning, so to beat the heat. But we got through with the parade about 11:30, and we were in a convertible. The Panda was sitting in the front seat. I was sitting on the top of where the top would go down. And we pulled up to the very end of the parade, and they opened the door for the Panda, and she just sort of fell out of the car. She had passed out because it was so hot. I mean, she maybe fainted. She was okay, but they got the head off of her and she was just pouring she was going between being flushed and pale at the same time. But she was fine. But she said, thank you. And if you come to town again, I'll just watch from the sidelines.
I did Little Shop of Horrors, and I was the prop guy in the show. So I did all the extra characters and stuff, but I also was the plant. I was the puppeteer in the plant.
Oh, yes.
One time at intermission, they were running around going, where's Scotty? Where's Scotty? Where's Scotty? And then they go back up to the plant. I'm in the plant passed out. I was not feeling well, and I was dripping just like she was. And I was out. They had to take me to the shower. They told everyone in the theater, our show will begin in 15 minutes. And they were doing all these delays.
The plant back.
They get me back in so I could finish the second.
Did you do the second? You did it?
I did.
Did you feel all right after that?
Of the month.
Yeah, I was okay after that, but they even put extra water bottles inside the plant for me. And I did Gatorade. There was one of the other prop masters ran out, got Gatorade at the store at intermission so I could drink that all down. I was fine at the end, but it was kind of funny. Just like that, you just get so overheated and you're doing your thing. You just don't want to disappoint anybody, you know?
Well, what do you do? What is your full-time job now? Or do you have a full-time job, or do you?
I do. And that's kind of where we didn't want to go today, but I do ghost hunting and spiritual work full-time now.
Oh, that's right. I think you did that too. And
I did that back then when we first met. Oh, let me tell that story to everybody, because I can't believe that David remembers. We met him in Pittsburgh at the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh. My wife, my boys, and
Billy
and myself. We all went. We were going to a paranormal convention, and we stopped by there because we always like to do things on the way out, because we love museums. We love art museums, and that Children's Museum is by far one of my favorite places in the world. But anyway, we were going to this event, and we saw that David was signing autographs that day. And we waited in this line, and I'll tell you my backstory on it. We waited in this line, and normally when people sign autographs, and I have other autographs, even sports guys, they come in and go, say, hi, goodbye, they sign, and that's it. And we were waiting here for quite a while to see David. And then we realized David was talking to everybody. And that to me meant so much to me. It just almost broke my heart. I almost started crying, because you really cared about everybody you saw in that line that day. And you talked to every single person there. And to me, that was the most incredible thing I ever remember.
Yeah, I do that, and they hurry me up, and I said I can't do it in a hurry because I remember once, just as you said, with a sports personality, I was getting an autograph from either a sports personality or a cowboy star. I can't remember, and
Same thing.
or maybe both.
Yeah.
And I remember they didn't even look up. And I remembered that. And, not that they have to, they were doing something. And maybe the people who wanted the autograph just wanted the autograph because they're valuable. At any rate, I like to find out what the people do for a living, their parents. I like to find out if they're in school and where they're from and what are you doing in Pittsburgh, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just very interested in that. And Fred did the same thing. It would take forever to get through a line because he genuinely wanted to find out. It's very tiring too. And that's why.
As I understand it. And like you said, I gave you my card because I was doing my radio show back then. We never hooked up, but today we did finally. Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's now it's video.
Right.
Now it's yes, and I have the card. I have on my desk. You can't see them, but I have tons of cards of people I've met. For the most part, I remember something about that person on the card. I'll try to jot a note down. Sometimes when I don't do that, it gets a little fuzzy, but I do remember that day. And for your viewers and listeners, the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh is quite a wonderful place. If they're ever in Pittsburgh, they should try to go to see it. It has some original Mr. Rogers puppets on display too. And there is another museum in Pittsburgh for any visitors who are thinking about coming to Pittsburgh called the Heinz History Museum. And that's where they have the original set, the Mr. Rogers neighborhood interior, as well as some of the neighborhood of make-believe put up. They have the whole set. They just don't have everything up yet. But it's quite something to see. So anybody listening or watching this, if they're coming to Pittsburgh, it's really, and especially if you're a Mr. Rogers fan, I think they'd enjoy seeing the actual set that we used. Axial's trees there, King Freddy's Castle, and a few other. Oh, my bicycle is there.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
and the interior.
Now?
Pardon me?
Is the bicycle there now?
Yes.
It's displayed? Okay.
It's displayed, but I had several bicycles. I had two-wheelers, but this one is the last one I had, which is a three-wheeler. It had a basket. Because I don't know if I ever told you this story. I never learned to ride a bicycle. We lived on a hill, and I never had a bicycle. I since have learned, but I don't get on bicycles very often.
Right.
So the first time I ever rode a bicycle was when I had to deliver something to X the Owl. Very first show we did in the neighborhood of Make Believe. And I delivered, I could cheat because I could just walk in with it, do the scene, and then get on the bike and go around the tree and exit. Well, I got around the tree, but I managed to hit the branch and I could hear the cameraman laughing. And it's an outtake.
Yeah,
that we have.
They added an extra wheel for that.
Yeah, so then I had training wheels for a while. They didn't shoot them. They didn't see them.
They shot above them, yeah.
Yes, but then I had the other bike because it worked out better because you could bring more things on it too. You could put deliveries in the basket in the back. So that's the one that's in the museum, and
That's cool.
It's the Heinz History Center Museum in Pittsburgh, and the Pittsburgh Children's Museum. That's the name of it.
Yeah, museum, yeah.
And then about 50 miles east of Pittsburgh, there's a college by the name of St. Vincent's. And you probably know this, Scotty, that's the Fred Rogers Center. They have a whole building that's the archive for the neighborhood. And that's open to the public. And that has a timeline and more props and a timeline of the history of the show that's open to the public. It's free. Or if you're studying children's television, it's a place that you can access.
20,000 items and counting.
Pardon me?
20,000 items and counting.
Is that? Oh, yes. And I'm
Yeah.
taking 5 more boxes up tomorrow or on Monday that I keep finding in my basement of artifacts that we used or could be used there. I have 10 file cabinets myself of appearances I've made, a
Oh,
folder that have to
Photograph
go.
them first. You put
Yeah,
'em
oh
up,
yeah, oh yes, but a
don't let
lot
'em
of it,
go.
what I did. Oh, well, the other part of this, Scotty, I started out with the first part of my career at the neighborhood, but
right.
I then went from associate producer, always doing McFeely, to the public relations person for the program. And in that respect, I would be in charge of everything that Fred did and tried to promote the program
Oh,
to
wow, that's great.
the outside world and still do McFeely. And I would do a lot of traveling as McFeely to public stations, and each station would have a different event. You
Right.
know, come and meet Mr. McFeely and celebrate our 30th anniversary, that type of thing.
Right. Right.
And I did. That's what got me to Madison,
Okay.
and to Milwaukee, and to Oshkosh, and all of that. I've
That's
been.
where my wife's from, Oshkosh.
Oh,
That's where I went to school.
Fred had a good friend there who taught at the college there. He was a music teacher. He taught Fred music. Uh,
My
oh,
Terry's best friend, who she was in our wedding as one of our bridesmaids. Her dad was one of the teachers at the music college at Oshkosh.
what's
Wonderful with him.
his name?
Manir.
Boy, that
I
sounds.
don't, I don't know if that's her maiden name but it's close. I'll find out and I'll send you the links after the show.
Okay, because now
Let's
I'm
see if we can
trying to.
find out if they would know each other because
Oh,
that's
Something.
the music house where Fred's friend would have taught was where the theater was built on top of.
Wow.
oh, and I did something there. I think I did a reading of something at that college too at one point at Oshkosh. But I've been to all the states now several times, including Guam and the Virgin Islands and Alaska and Hawaii.
Talk
Doing
about
events.
talk about theaters though, and I know you dig theaters because you're like me too. I like ancient theaters. I love it with all my heart. I love seeing them. I love seeing abandoned theaters. Anything about a theater. A lot of kids like to see trains and dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Me, it was theaters. I love theaters.
I do too. In fact, do you know the association called the Theater Historical Society? Are you familiar with
No,
that?
no,
I belong to it. I belong to it. Its headquarters are in Pittsburgh. Here's the brochure.
Okay.
There we go.
I'll send you one.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But our goal or our mission is not so much theater, the plays, the playwrights, it's the architecture of the theaters and the preservation of those. Most cities, and they'll just
tear them down,
bulldoze and put out a Rite Aid store or something.
Right.
And but some cities are better than others. And if you could repurpose, and Milwaukee lost a lot of beautiful theaters. In fact, I have a book here called Milwaukee's Theaters, the history of the Milwaukee theaters.
Wow.
They had some beautiful theaters at one point, and still do, but not as many.
Do. Yeah, they're not the same anymore. But I mean, when I went to school at Oshkosh, at the college there, the Grand Opera House, which is downtown Oshkosh, was being rebuilt. It
really?
It went to it was XXX house for a while, for movies.
Oh.
I mean, it went from theater all the way to, and then when they rebuilt it and refurbished it, they played the first play ever that was there originally, got redone again for that night to reopen.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And our school, which was really cool, is we spent a lot of time in the theater, in my theater career, my program, is we learned about how to look at old pictures, and we deciphered paint. We would go into the theater and pick paint down, and try to, find out the original colors. What was this wall originally? It was not this red, it was a yellow. So then it ended up being, then we would take it and get it matched, and then they would paint it back.
It probably had 5 layers of paint over the years.
At least. Yeah, and what the worst one was, for a while, everything was black.
Yeah, well, I always had a fascination with the theaters, but also the era of vaudeville. I don't know if your listeners viewers know what that is, but it was really variety shows before radio. That was and before movies. There were the theaters, and you could go at 11 o'clock in the morning and see a performance. And
I get all my jokes from vaudeville. So like David, oh my gosh, I have a week back. You're supposed to ask me, when did you get a week back?
When did you get a week back?
Oh, about a week back.
Oh, but I'm bummed.
And you know
I loved it.
You know the follow-up or the continuation of vaudeville was in a way the Ed Sullivan Show. Remember the Ed Sullivan Show?
I do, yeah.
And that was what vaudeville was like, only on stage and right down the street. It could be in Oshkosh or it could be in a city of 10,000 people. Every city had live shows, and that's what and there was a whole route, whatever that is, of
Either
a chain. And then below that, well, theater was the top, the touring theaters. Then there was vaudeville, and then there was burlesque.
correct.
And burlesque they called that the Peel Wheel. The wheel where you would travel, the comics would travel. And that was an art in itself. And in those days, it was naughty, but it wasn't terrible. Now it's
Pop
changed.
the last balloon.
Right.
Pardon me?
When you pop the last balloon.
They never popped the last balloon.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
they didn't. But see, that's the thing. Right now in Wisconsin, they have a new burlesque society, just like the theater one you're in. And they're bringing back burlesque in Wisconsin. So
Wow.
at least they did before the pandemic. You know, then it'll get back to it again.
Gonna kill
They were
that.
starting to do shows like that again.
But the comics are what, in a way, brought
I agree.
kept the burlesque going. They in between the dance act and the production they had, it depended on what city you're in. Minsky's in New York. Here's Mr. Feely talking about burlesque, but Minsky's had opulent stagings, you know, and that's expensive. But as they went out to the smaller cities, it wasn't quite as elaborate, but it was there.
Right.
And I found that era fascinating.
Me too.
That whole, and the theaters were wonderful, and some of those are still remaining. Some of those vaudeville theaters, and so support your local. I sort of cringe at the word when they say refurbished. It should be renovated. No, it shouldn't be renovated. It should be refurbished, right?
Right.
Because renovated means you gotta not know what
Make it something
like.
new. Right.
Totally
You
different.
want it original. You want it exactly.
Yes.
Could you touch on what did Fred, what the gift that he gave you in the 143 book section with his closest friends, Fred's closest friends, and he gave a variety of gifts. Some of them very whimsical, but what was your gift?
My gift was, well, Fred knew that I had this obsession with theater and the physical buildings too. And sadly, there was a theater that was torn down near where he lived, or in where he went shopping, in a little shopping area. And one day I came into the office, and on my desk was a brick. And I said, who put this brick here? And Fred came in. He knew that I was in my office, and I would, how do you miss a brick on your desk? And he poked around the corner, and he said, I said, did you put this here? He said, yes, I got it from the Sheridan Square Theater. That was the name of it. And I was driving by, and I knew you would like the brick. And I think, do you still have that brick? Did I send it to you, Kristen?
No, I've got the picture
No.
of the brick.
You took I think I
Half
have
of
it
it,
at the office. It's still at the office. I used it I still have it. I used it as a doorstop for many, many years. But that gives you a little insight into who Fred Rogers was too. He always thought and associated likes of people, my love of theater and buildings. And, you know, he thought he was walking by that demolition zone where they were tearing the theater down, picked a brick up and brought it in, and somehow thought of me when he saw the old theater in rubble.
He just carried so many people around in his head with him.
Yeah,
It was
yes.
remarkable.
Just as remarkable as this guy sitting right here.
Well,
Because-
let me tell you, what would you
Because
think?
I agree. I think that him remembering me I will always, this is one of my biggest days to talk with you like this. I can't tell you what this means to me.
Well, I'm so glad we met. That I do remember. I would not have, I remember meeting you, and I remember the essence of you. I couldn't tell you if you had brown eyes, blue eyes at that point.
Right.
But I knew you had, your wife was with you and your boys. I remember all that. And the card rang about that. And you were in Philadelphia, stuck in my mind. I couldn't remember if you're from Philadelphia, or I did not remember the Wisconsin part. I
Right.
remember the Philadelphia part.
But even to know Philadelphia, not Pittsburgh, that's remarkable. And what would you think would be the thing said most often at Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, right? Won't you be my neighbor or something? Let me tell
Yes.
you what it really is. Ask David.
Yeah, yes, I get that a lot because I've been a
Everybody I
lifer.
interviewed, ask David.
Because when you think of it, we started taping in 67, September of 67. It went on the air with the backlog February 19th, 1968. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's been on, when you think of it, ever since in some form. It's still on.
Still in everywhere.
Yeah. It has a different schedule, and you can stream it now. It's on PBS Kids. There's a PBS Kids streaming channel now that you can get it, and it's also on Amazon. Some of the public stations show it on weekends, and also the Fred Rogers Productions has a website, and they show a new week every week. That you can go into Fred Rogers Productions website and see the program too. So it's still with us.
You know what I think the greatest thing, though, you and Fred and your whole organization of everybody that was with you, was the amount of work you did for the kids, and how unique you guys were, and how it was attuned to kids. Because when I was a kid, I was watching it. It was just incredible. It kept me coming every week, but it taught me so much. And I know that that yours is so many years, but I know that that's what my wife and I, and Kristen's a part of it, our organization is doing now, is trying to help kids a different way, but we're still trying to help kids. We're still trying, it's about them that don't have that support, don't have that understanding, and we want to give them the love. And that's what you guys did.
And you may have caught that from the neighborhood in a way. By what?
I agree. I agree 100%.
And
because I watched every episode.
You maybe know the story of there's a Mormon saying, not Mormon, a Quaker saying is that attitudes are caught, not taught. Do you ever hear that? Attitudes are caught,
that's a wonderful. I'm gonna do that.
And I'll give you a quick story, is that when Fred was doing his practical work of observing children at play for his degree in child development, he would be assigned to go to the University of Pittsburgh's Child Care Center and observe. And each week, a parent would bring in something that was associated with his or her job. And one week, a sculptor came in with a big chunk of clay and put it down in the middle of the table. The kids were all sitting around, and he didn't say anything. He just started to mold something and encouraged kids to take a chunk and mold it. And they said that the artwork from the rest of that semester with those kids just was very imaginative.
Yeah.
And Fred always said that that saying that attitudes are caught, not taught. And if you love doing something in front of children, they'll catch what you love. And that sculptor loved to be a sculptor. He loved what he was doing. And those kids caught that. And I think in some way, that's how Fred taught on television. And Scotty, in some ways, I think you caught Fred's love for teaching and education and children through the program. And that's how he teaches. And that's a wonderful saying, though, that attitudes are caught, not taught. And it's so
amazing. I'm so glad you taught me that, because I'm definitely going to use it, because it makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't know, and it's not, Fred didn't, that's not Fred's.
No, I know, but I never even heard that even there. So, That makes so
Yes.
much
To
sense.
love it
And-
right in front of them, in front of
Yeah,
children.
if you love what you're doing in front of children, they'll catch it. And that's a very simple sentence for all teachers, I think. You know, if teachers, I think in some way, if my algebra teacher if I saw that he loved what he was doing in front of
boy.
me, I may have done better.
I don't know if they would have done it with me.
No, I don't think it would have done it to me too. I was too lost at that point. You know, I was thinking one of the most important grades, I think, is the 3rd and 4th grade, because in the 4th grade is where they start fractions. And that's the whole basis of algebra when you think about it.
Right.
You know, and if you lose the fractions, if you don't get that, math is hard.
Yeah.
And see, I was good on on the tables. You can memorize those.
Yep.
You can't remember. You
The
can't
nines were a
memorize
little
that.
shaky for a while. 9 times 6, 9 times 7.
But
Finally,
you know, I am so glad I learned those. You know, you never stop using the timetable. Never.
no.
And now I'm sad because I've heard some schools are stopping teaching cursive writing. Did you?
I can't stand
I
that.
just heard that
Get a
too.
letter. I mean,
Yeah, how did I think people should know how to write cursive,
absolutely.
but oh well. I mean, not all. I think some schools. I don't know if it's a state by state or city by city or school board by school board. I don't know, but a lot have not. In fact, there are some in the Pittsburgh area that are not teaching cursive, and I think you should. Oh, just
The individuality that is expressed through your handwriting.
yeah, and it's art too. When you look at handwriting, it's a form of art.
Well,
You know,
Fred's
and-
writing. Oh
Oh,
my
it was wonderful. He had two forms of writing. He had his signature writing, he'd write Fred Rogers. And when he wrote script, longhand or whatever you call that,
Yeah.
it was different.
Mhm.
But he had a very distinctive.
I was thinking of his Y's are like 7s, straight lines.
Yeah. Well, and as the F's and Fred, they have a little. It looked like a backward 7.
Yeah,
at
that
time.
is- yeah.
But he had a wonderful hand, very distinctive, very much fit his personality too.
I
And
want
I
to
think that
think about you that a lot of people think of you as Mr. McFeely, and
Oh.
solely as Mr. McFeely. Increasingly, I hope less so, because when I was interviewing you for the 143 book, you're so modest, you're not going to toot your own horn. But if you listen carefully enough at the things that you will admit were your idea, or the other things you did, the extraordinary difference you made to the neighborhood is unbelievable.
Right.
I mean, this man thought of the things like Margaret Hamilton coming on the
Yeah.
show to so kids wouldn't be scared of a witch or someone wearing a costume.
or of frightening images, witches and monsters, etc. Yeah, but it helped using
Thought
that image.
of them packing up and going to Russia, Mr.
Yeah.
Rogers going to Russia. And the week themes, those were your idea too. So many
Well, in a way, that the week themes were, I thought of a theme for the week, but we did think
yeah.
when we came back to tape that we took 2 years off, and Fred did a series called Old Friends, New Friends.
Mhm.
And then 1979 we came back, and I think it was a combination of saying, you know, if we did the whole week as a theme, we were thinking PR wise too, that we can promote Mr. Rogers Goes to School. That was the promotion.
First one.
And that helped because we had a school booklet. And so that wasn't just my idea. That was sort of a committee idea.
Yeah.
But the superhero week was my idea, not the week, but the superhero theme was.
Because kids were jumping off buildings, weren't they, pretending to be Superman?
Yes, never forget that is that Fred and I were in Hawaii, and he was speaking at a national convention that was being held in Hawaii for children. I mean, people who work with children. And we were going to somewhere, and I remember being in a taxi and reading the paper. It was a long ride where we were going, and I saw these little articles saying that in Nebraska, wherever, a little boy jumped off his garage roof, the towel around his neck, thinking he could fly like Superman. And a lot of those were happening. And I said, maybe there's something we could do about this, Fred. And we tried the Superman, we couldn't get the clearance for Superman, but it was more of the superhero. So we asked Bill Bixby, who was directing the series and starring in The Incredible Hulk, which, by the way, scared our 3-year-old daughter at the time. And she had nightmares because she inadvertently saw it one evening, turned the TV on, and there was Incredible Hulk. And I said, could we do something with Incredible Hulk? So we went to Universal Studios and we visited the Hulk, watched Bill Bixby get into Lou Ferrigno get into his monster makeup, his green paint and so forth, makeup, and broke it down and showed that it was pretend.
Mhm.
And that was my idea. And so, but it's Fred who said he wrote the script, but
Right.
he used an idea that I had. And the same with Margaret Hamilton, who was the Wicked Witch.
Right.
Now
Who, by the way,
now
do you know who that
remember-
is, Scotty? Margaret
Yeah.
Hamilton, the
Yeah, I
actress?
do know Margaret Hamilton.
And she was a lovely person.
I bet. It
She
would.
became good friends with you, didn't she, and came to visit you once Taylor was born?
Yeah, oh, that's right. Yes. We have 3 kids, as I've mentioned. Taylor's our middle son. And when he was born, we had known Maggie before that because she was on the program. And we took our daughter to New York and to see Peter Pan. And we had lunch with her, with Maggie. And then we went to see Peter Pan. But then when our son was born, she said, well, I'm coming to Pittsburgh. She said, why don't you pick me up at the airport in Pittsburgh and we'll spend the day together. And I did. And we went into the studio and she saw Fred. And then we went to our house and she sat with our two-week-old son on our couch. And I have a picture of that.
Oh,
And,
Oh,
but then our phone rang and it was a neighbor's. And she said, did I just see the Wicked Witch of the West go into your kitchen? And yes. And then I took her back to the airport and she went back to New York. That's where she lived in New York. So it wasn't that long of a trip. It wasn't like it was Los Angeles.
but how kind and just endearing.
Lovely person.
yeah, you
and-
should have
and-
done the superhero thing earlier because I ended up jumping off the roof a lot.
You
Did you really?
You were one of those guys? And that's
I was the worst one I took, but I did it in the winter time. At least I jumped into snow. So I was a little bit better, but later in life, I tried to be Evel Knievel. And
oh boy. Yeah,
Oh.
that was the other element.
Yeah.
That was all sort of that package of
Right.
Daredevil stuff.
correct,
And
right.
Mr.
But,
McFeely never did the Evel Knievel thing.
no,
Good.
no.
I'm
It's
glad.
somebody else.
But a lot of children, the preschool age group, they don't separate fantasy and reality. It's all one to them. And that's why Fred Rogers has taken time to separate the two. Neighborhood of Make-Believe is anything can happen, that's pretend. But he sets up the concept that it's reality, let's pretend, come back to reality. It's like a symphony, and Fred's a musician and you are too, but Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is like a symphony in a way when you think of it. The first part where he comes in, changes the sweater, is like setting up the theme. Yeah.
And all the warm up.
Prelude, yeah.
And then the variations on the theme is the Neighborhood of Make-Believe, pretend, and then it's all brought back and they wind up in a finale at the very end. And I wonder if in some ways Fred thought of it that way. I don't know. He's classically trained.
If not,
And he wrote the operas as well.
Yes,
if
that's
not,
true.
it was caught, not
Yeah.
taught.
Yes.
Fred, so it
I
could
think-
have been caught by Fred through his whole life. That's what a symphony is, and that's why
Yes.
he's trying to show that.
Yeah.
But I had all of those elements. I think a little bit of all was in there. I think his musical training probably led to some of it, but I think you're right. He caught a lot of that.
I know before
Anyhow.
we get going here,
Yeah.
I want to ask one more question. Who
You
designed?
mean we
the
haven't started yet? Get going, you mean?
puppet? Okay, we can get going. I don't care. I have so many more questions and love to talk for hours.
That could be in part 2 someday.
I said we could have McFeely to David Newell to.
I'd be happy to have you back anytime you ever want. I'm
Okay.
excited to have you. This was incredible. But who created the puppets? Last question, then we'll end it.
Oh boy.
I have
Some of them existed when I came to the Children's Corner. X the Owl, Daniel Tiger, and King Friday were on the children's corner, but they were off the counter puppets. One was a Steiff puppet. Daniel Tiger was, remember
Oh,
those very fine puppets, the Steiff.
Yeah.
And they got a cease and desist. You can't use that, I think, at one point. So Fred had a version of a tiger made, and so it started that way. And over the years, then when it came Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, there was a puppet maker in New York City whose name was Lee Howard. And he did props and different things for television shows, and he made the puppets. And when we added the puppet, he would create it. Fred would say, here's what I'd like to have. And he would create it and introduce it. Like the cow, Harriet Cow, and the Platypus Family were all done later on. And I remember going to New York, picking them up. I would fly to New York because I was in charge of the puppets too, picking up the new puppets, and they'd be introduced. And Fred would do some of the voices, and some other people would do other voices of the puppets. But Fred did mainly, I would say, 75% of all the puppet voices. There were a few others, but Fred did most of them.
You
And
were
did
a puppeteer on occasion.
for a while at the very beginning. Well, no, during the time I was doing props, when Fred needed another a pair of hands, I would manipulate, but he would do the voices.
Yeah.
We would be behind the castle, and we could see, and I could put them on my hands. Fred could see via a monitor, and I could move them, but he would speak for them. Yeah, there were other puppeteers too, but mainly it was usually just a couple of puppets at one point that Fred could do and talk to the puppets. But Fred had the dialogue with him. He would have it taped onto the monitor.
Yeah.
And he could see what was going on front. And but we had to memorize our lines, of course, the actors. We didn't have a scripted.
Well,
but
you're one of the only ones who was in both the real, television house and then the Neighborhood of Make Believe.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, Joe Negri was too, but he was a different character.
But they were, for instance, Joe Negri would be Joe Negri in the reality section with the music shop. Mm-hmm. But in the Neighborhood of Make Believe, he was Handyman Negri. So he was in both, but two different personas, I guess.
Correct.
Yeah,
and
always Mr. McFeely.
But I was always Mr. McFeely. That's true. I was the only. That's true. I can't think of another. I don't know. Maybe there's an exception, but I was always McFeely.
I can't think of another McFeely either.
Pardon me?
I said I can't think of another McFeely.
Oh, well, good.
Other than
you. All the places that David has gone, like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of places, and everything he has done, and his generosity of spirit. That's why we're doing this book, because his memories are incredible, and so that's why. Part of the reason why he's cleaning out his basement, because I harassed him mercilessly.
Well, that's one reason, and my wife can't stand the other. She says, "You've got to get this off the floor. At least get the balconies." But when we moved we moved our offices when the company started to expand. After Fred's death, it took us a while to get collected, and the neighborhood continued, and we would do some different books and so forth. But then I think the board of directors figured, well, we have to look at this legacy seriously. And that's how Daniel Tiger became about. It was an offshoot. And when Daniel came about, we moved our offices to another building, and referencing all of the stuff on my floor. So we had to get out fast. So because the office we moved into needed this, and they needed the office space WQED. So make a long story short, I just packed up boxes and put them in my car, took them home, put them in the garage, went back and got another, put them in the basement, and that's where they stayed for the last couple of years. So more than that. But now I'm working on that, and it's not too speedy.
It's okay. You're allowed not to have a speedy delivery.
At any rate, it's been a wonderful. We've been on for an hour, haven't we?
Yeah.
I do have one more quick question. The rumor I heard. I want to know. This is a prop question.
You have one more, Christine?
I have a prop question.
Yes.
Okay, the famous episode on death when
Uh-huh.
Fred talks to kids about losing his dog, Mitzi, and it was
Uh-huh.
very moving. But it starts with him finding a dead goldfish in the
That's
feeding
right. That's
goldfish.
right.
Is it true that you had to go find the dead goldfish?
I did. You know, we didn't want to kill a fish to do that
No,
segment.
no, exactly. We'll make sure he's dead. Hit him
but
again.
but we talked. Fred said instead of doing a dog or having a grandparent or someone in the neighborhood have some, he said it was his idea. He did it with Margaret McFarlane's assistant, his psychological guru. She was his mentor, a person who knew children backwards and forwards, taught at the University of Pittsburgh School of Child Development. Wonderful woman. Uh, Consulted with her, and I think between the two of them, they came up with a goldfish. Well, actually, a tropical fish. And so during a production meeting, I said, well, Fred said, I bet if you go to a pet store, there's always a couple fish in the fish tank that have died. And I asked if I could have them. I went in and said, could you give me the few of those dead fish? And then they looked at me strangely. And I explained what we were doing. And of course they did. And that's how I got the dead fish. But on camera it worked fine. Fred, we planted the fish, and it gave him a chance to talk about the concept. And he buried the fish, took the fish out, buried it, and talked about it, and related to the children through the television how sad he was when his dog Mitzi died when she was younger. It was a very poignant and I think helpful scene.
Beautifully done.
And I think at the same time was not threatening either to children or concerning to children. It was more of a process for a young child explaining what he was doing. And I think he wanted to get the emotion out too, talking about his feelings too. And he used Mitzi for that to remember. So that was, yes, Kristen, you're right.
Think about that fish. What a noble thing the fish did. It never knew it would be famous.
Never knew. I never knew. But at any rate, that episode still exists, and I think it's on a cassette somewhere or one of those DVDs. Not cassettes. You can tell what era. It's on even DVDs are becoming a thing of the past, aren't they?
I know.
They are.
So annoying.
It's streaming now.
Yeah. That's the good thing, though. I mean, you're talking about that, and Kristen brings that up. But I mean, that's what I even do today. Is I try to help people with death. That it's not scary. It's something that we all should embrace. And the best thing after is to remember the people that were here with us and taught us and guided us, like Fred has done for so many millions of people. And look at what you've done. And it's just been so incredible. And that's why I wanted you on here tonight. Not to talk about that, but to talk about how love supersedes everything that we do. And I say that every week on every one of my shows. It's all about love.
It is, and I think Fred said the same thing in different ways. But just look at how he used television in a very positive way. The way television was intended to be used, and he took the medium that is so wonderful and did something positive with it. Right. And other programs, certainly he's not the only, but he had his own way of using it. Correct. A very unique way of using television.
And he did it more of love than anyone I know.
Yeah. No, you're right. And he wasn't interested in selling cornflakes. No. He wanted to sell love and neighborliness and helping others and all of that. And I think the combination of his music, of his theology, he used all of that in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And it's really I was very fortunate to be able to spend a good part of my career working with Fred Rogers. And here I am relating some of it to you guys.
Well, he was equally fortunate.
Yeah.
Well, good. Thank you, Kristen. That was a nice way of saying it. I agree with you. Yeah, he was fortunate to have us, right? His staff,
Absolutely.
because we
They're
all
such a team.
we were, I looked at, now we can sum up with this. I looked at Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood as a sort of a wagon wheel, with the spokes coming out. And right in the center was a hub. And Fred was the hub. And all of us, the cast, the crew, the director, the other people were all supporting Fred's mission
Right.
of television. And I don't know if that's a corny analogy or not,
No,
but
it
you know
isn't
what I
corny
mean.
at all.
I love it. I think it's great.
No,
Well, Kristen, thank you for coming on tonight. I
Oh,
really
thank you,
appreciate
Scotty.
My
And David,
pleasure.
you too. Like I said before, you're always welcome. Everybody at home, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. Next week, I have John Kachuba on, author from Ohio. So we'll be talking to him next week. So thank you guys so much for being here. And as always, this is what Scotty talks about.
Thanks
David,
for watching.
David,
everybody.
last words.
Speedy delivery.
Yeah, I wanted that one. Woo-hoo. I couldn't leave without it. All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.